A third runway at Heathrow Airport is given the go-ahead by the government.
We believe a third runway for Heathrow is the best option for our future. It's the best for the whole country to kind of create better connectivity to the different regions of the United Kingdom and to provide the best trade links to the world.
There's local anger and nearly 800 homes would have to be demolished, but many business leaders say the economy will benefit and jobs will be created.
I know people who are having to move after 30 years of living here because they cannot cope anymore. They're going around their homes with noise-cancelling headphones. How can that be acceptable?
A third runway at Heathrow for all of us in the southwest of England producing really smart luxury brands would be fantastic for export. We'd be able to reach really good markets directly and quickly.
But a final decision is at least a year away after a public consultation and a vote in Parliament. We'll be live at Heathrow and Gatwick for reaction. Also this lunchtime. The French authorities hope to begin demolishing the jungle camp in Calais, but thousands of migrants are still there. Militants have attacked a police training college in Pakistan, killing at least 60 people. And care providers say most local councils fail to pay realistic prices to support older and disabled people in their homes.
And here in the south, cleared for takeoff as Heathrow is granted a third runway, we ask what next for Gatwick? And the inquest into the death of a nurse who died under the care of Southern Health continues.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. The government has given the go-ahead for the construction of a third runway at Heathrow Airport, in preference to the expansion of Gatwick. The Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, says the Heathrow proposal is the right one for the whole country and shows the UK is open for business in the wake of the vote to leave the EU. But a final decision is at least a year away. A public consultation will now be held before a vote by MPs. Several cabinet members who represent London constituencies are opposed to the plans, including the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. Our transport correspondent Richard Westcott is at Heathrow. Richard.
Well, 4 years ago, I vividly remember having a conversation with the then Conservative-led coalition government, and they told me a third runway at Heathrow was dead and buried. I wrote the words down. 4 years later, with a new Conservative Prime Minister, and she's effectively given the green light to a very similar scheme. The government saying, well, look, it's the best one for the economy, but they've picked the toughest job as well. It's going to be the most expensive, have the highest cost to the taxpayer, do the most damage to the environment, and it's the scheme that's going to face the fiercest opposition.
right, clear takeoff, wind 060, 119.
Heathrow's at full throttle all the time.
Takeoff, runway 098,
From 4:30 in the morning till long into the night, ferrying 75 million passengers and more than a quarter of Britain's exports by value. They can't squeeze in more flights, so the government's cleared it for expansion.
We believe a third runway for Heathrow is the best option for our future. It's the best for the whole country to kind of create better connectivity to the different regions of the United Kingdom and to provide the best trade links to the world. So we think this is the right decision for Britain.
So what have they agreed to? Well, here's Heathrow today. 2 runways north and south. The third runway will be slightly above them, up here. Harmondsworth will be one of the 3 villages partly flattened to clear a path. It's got a jumbo price tag of nearly £18 billion. Will create around 77,000 new jobs, but destroy nearly 800 homes. Well, you can see just how busy the airport is. The aircraft queuing up behind me. That's why they say they want a new runway. But that noise, that's exactly why the idea of getting bigger upset so many people. 5 miles away, leafy Teddington's not officially blighted by Heathrow noise, but for a third of the year they get this.
Last night our child was woken up at just past midnight. Woken again this morning at 6 a.m.
Last 2 weeks. Every day, every minute.
Residents say it used to be okay until a couple of years ago when planes suddenly began flying lower. They plan to challenge expansion in the courts.
I know people who are having to move after 30 years of living here because they cannot cope anymore. They're going around their homes with noise-cancelling headphones. How can that be acceptable?
They're more relaxed about the plans on this tea plantation in Cornwall. They can't hear the planes, but they can feel the benefits.
A third runway at Heathrow for all of us in the southwest of England producing really smart luxury brands would be fantastic for export. We'd be able to reach really good markets directly and quickly, and with a connecting flight into Newquay, that would be the business.
The government picked a favourite today, but MPs won't vote on the scheme for another year. That gives Heathrow critics like Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson plenty of time to air their views.
Are you still going to oppose Heathrow, Boris? Yes, you are.
With so many legal and political challenges ahead, some doubt plans to grow Heathrow will ever get off the ground. Now, there are a lot of statistics around this story, but I want to pick one out because I think it's been very interesting today. The government says that this scheme will make £61 billion for the UK economy over 60 years. Why is that interesting? Because it's a lot more cautious than the figure the Independent Airports Commission put on how much it's going to make. 147 billion, they say, and Heathrow talk about 211 billion. It sums up these big infrastructure projects. You never really know, no one can ever agree just how much money they're going to make and what damage they're going to do. Anyway, we've got the green light today, but it's not over yet. It's going to be another year before MPs even vote on this scheme.
Richard, thank you. Richard Westcott. So as we heard, there is opposition to a new runway from environmentalists and people who live close to the airport. Campaigners fear that the village of Harmondsworth will be demolished. Also, of course, as we've been hearing, Heathrow lost out to Gatwick. The authorities there, of course, have been hoping that their airport would be expanded. Let's get more on that from our correspondent Theo Leggett, who is there. So nothing in this for Gatwick. What reaction where you are, Theo?
Very little comfort for Gatwick, but then that was kind of expected. Heathrow always was the favourite and Gatwick was the outsider. But what people here are saying is that it isn't over. Heathrow, as you were hearing from Richard, faces a number of obstacles before the concrete can actually be laid. There are going to be legal challenges, there is opposition from environmentalists, there is high-level political opposition to a third runway at Heathrow. And executives at Gatwick think that means that Heathrow's third runway will never actually be built. And at some point in the future, there is going to be a need for a plan B. Gatwick says it can be that plan B, that it's on standby, it is ready to proceed as and when it gets asked to do so. So they're seeing this as not the end of the process at all. After all, there's a long public consultation to come. They think there's still a great deal to play for, and they're going to be ready if Heathrow isn't able to come up with the goods.
Theo, thank you. Theo Leggett there at Gatwick. Well, let's assess all of this with our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, at Westminster. And that is a key question. Will this at Heathrow actually get built, Norman?
Well, Jane, you're right in this sense that the history of Heathrow is a history of aborted takeoffs, frankly, as successive governments, really going back to the era of propeller planes and chocks away, have frankly bottled it. And this time there will again be pressure to do exactly the same. There will be protests by environmental groups, there'll be legal challenges, opposition from local authorities, up to 40, maybe even 60 Tory MPs may fight the plans, big beasts like Boris Johnson, Justine Greening positioning themselves against it, a probable difficult by-election, and yet I sense maybe the pendulum has shifted this time, in part because there is a firm conviction in government that we risk becoming, frankly, an international laughingstock if we bottle it yet again. Secondly, business is crying blue murder for a decision at just the moment when the economy could be running into difficult territory. Prominent figures like the boss of BA, Willie Walsh, have signalled they are now on board, but above all, because of Brexit. There is a profound conviction in government that we have to demonstrate to the world that we are a confident, outward-looking, dynamic country, that we are optimistic about our future outside the EU and confident that we can carve out a prosperous future outside of the EU and that we don't shrink into ourselves. So yes, there will be very serious difficulties. It will be painful, it will be protracted, it could last more than a decade, but this time, maybe, there'll be no going back.
Norman, thank you. Norman Smith at Westminster. And now the rest of today's news. And French police are expected to start demolishing the Calais migrant camp known as the Jungle today. More than 3,000 people have been moved out of the area since yesterday and taken to shelters across France. But about 5,000 migrants are still there, as Simon Jones reports now from Calais.
Running to register. This morning many were keen but confused, particularly with the imminent destruction of the jungle and its squalid conditions. The authorities struggled to cope. Groups who support the migrants tried to restore calm. The closure of the camp for humanitarian and security reasons is forcing people here to think about their future, with one migrant considering returning to Afghanistan.
We leave our country to come here to make our future, but here we come, no future, no education, no money.
The buses are taking people to reception centres in France and offering the chance of asylum, but some say they won't take the risk of being deported.
I'm not going on the buses.
You're not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Because I'll try to get to the UK.
You still want to go to the UK?
Yes.
How will you try?
How? By my own means.
As the process of clearing part of the jungle gets underway today, some of the migrants here have already made a start themselves, ripping down some of the shops and restaurants which were declared illegal, chopping them up for firewood to try to stay warm. Unaccompanied children are registering to be moved to secure shipping containers near the jungle. But one charity believes the clearance of the camp should be halted until every child is accounted for.
We know that last time, when the south side of the camp was demolished, 125 children went missing. We can't have that again, and there's still hundreds and hundreds of children who are not in safe, protected spaces right now.
By mid-morning, there's concern that the number of people arriving voluntarily to leave is slowing down.
I'm surprised this morning because I was waiting the same system as yesterday, which has an amount to 1,000, 2,000 adults trying to go to the accommodation center, and I see that the lane is empty.
So not so many people turning up today?
No, not so many people turning up and not so many adults.
But the French authorities insist things are going according to plan and all children will be looked after.
And let's talk to Simon at the camp, and the scenes behind you, Simon, look exactly as they did yesterday. What's your assessment of how this is all progressing and what might happen now?
Well, so far today, some 650 migrants have got on buses to other parts of France. And in total, over the past couple of days, 3,100 migrants have been offered shelter away from the jungle. Now, after the lull this morning, today, there are more people turning up to register this afternoon. But there is still a sense of confusion over there. You've got a lot of people sitting around just trying to find out exactly what is happening. There also seems to be a particular delay in processing children, and the UNHCR is worried about that. They told us they believe the jungle demolition should be halted until all the children are accounted for. But we're told by the Interior Ministry that the demolition could begin any time now. But what we're not going to see are bulldozers racing in and ripping down the shacks and ramshackle shops. But what we're going to see is it done by hand initially. It's really a softly approach, because what they want to do is persuade the people here, the migrants, to come of their own accord. But the chief of Calais Police says he wants this operation done by the end of the week, although he fears 200 hardcore may try to sit it out and refuse to go.
Simon, thank you. Simon Jones there in Calais. Militants have attacked a police training academy in Pakistan, killing at least 60 people, most of them cadets and guards. 100 more were wounded. The attackers burst into a hostel in Quetta, where hundreds of cadets were sleeping. A senior security official has told the BBC he believed the gunmen were being directed from Afghanistan. Daniel Bircher has the latest.
Mobile phone footage released by the police in Quetta shows the inside of the police academy after the attack. In one of the dormitories, blackened walls and bed frames, many of those killed and injured had been asleep when the gunmen burst in. The attack began before midnight. Officials say the gunmen shot and killed a guard in a watchtower before storming into the college on the outskirts of the city. The base houses up to 700 trainees. Local media say the attackers headed for the dormitories and opened fire. Some of those inside tried to escape through windows or by jumping off rooftops. This man, who managed to get away, described the gunmen wearing masks coming directly into his barracks and firing at point-blank range. He said people started screaming and he then ran upstairs to get to safety. Police and military reinforcements arrived at the college within 20 minutes of the first gunshots. The exchange of fire between the attackers and security forces lasted several hours. Officials say 2 of the militants died after detonating suicide vests. The injured were taken to nearby hospitals. Most of the casualties were cadets and recruits. The college has been targeted twice before, most recently in 2008. The head of paramilitary forces in Quetta, Major General Sher Afghan, told media that calls intercepted between the attackers and their handlers suggested they were most likely to be from the banned militant group Lashkar-e-Jhangvi. Later, so-called Islamic State and a breakaway faction of the Taliban both claimed responsibility for the attack, though neither of those claims has been confirmed by Pakistani officials. The first funerals have been held for those killed in the attack, with senior military and political figures paying their respects. Daniel Bircher, BBC News.
The time is 17 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. The government has given the go-ahead for a third runway at Heathrow Airport. A new runway at Gatwick was rejected. Still to come on the programme, previous winners include Salman Rushdie and Ian McEwan, who will win this year's Man Booker Prize for the best new novel.
And coming up on Saturday just before 1:30, the inquest into the death of a nurse who died under the care of Southern Health continues. And we're given rare access on board Oxfordshire's RAF Chinooks and ask what's next for the famous aircraft.
With increasing numbers of elderly people in Britain needing care in their own home, 9 out of 10 local authorities aren't paying realistic prices to support older and disabled people. That's according to the UK Home Care Association, which says a growing number of companies are handing back their council contracts. But the government insists that more money is going into providing people with care. Our social affairs correspondent Alison Holt has this report.
Kim Hassel can travel miles during her shift. She covers large parts of rural South England as a care worker supporting people in their own homes. According to today's report, many councils simply don't cover the real costs of the time and training she and others need to provide that care.
Hello. Hello, my love. How are you? Nice to see you. And you?
85-year-old Pat Carrington normally gets help with washing and dressing. It means she and her 92-year-old husband can cope at home. Many of the people Kim supports are council funded. Often she finds she's up against the clock.
Some people might need an extra half an hour just so that you can put some washing on and change the bedding and change their clothes and things like that. It is a bit of a worry that they can't live the life they used to live before they needed care.
The UK Home Care Association calculates that home care costs at least £16.70 an hour, including the minimum wage, travel and training. But it says the average paid by UK councils is £14.58, with some paying a lot less. The boss of the not-for-profit agency Kim works for says they're having to walk away from council contracts to survive.
We've been really struggling over the last 2 years, and in fact we've had to hand back 4 of the 10 contracts that we had with local authorities, and we're currently reviewing 2 others, and we've also got other contracts where we haven't bid, even in areas where we're currently operating.
Councils say social care is underfunded and accept that care companies are struggling.
If they cannot take local authority contracts and are solely relying on the private sector, then that means that local authorities are going to find it very difficult to support those who need their help, the most vulnerable people in our society.
Well, I'll help you make your bed for you.
The government says it's up to councils to ensure care companies pay their staff properly, and that it is putting significantly more money into providing dignified care for people who need it.
And Alison is with me. What does this tell us, Alison, about the pressure on the care system?
Well, I think it tells us that at every stage of the care system, people are making very careful calculations, because we have an ageing population with people living longer with more complex needs. Now, clearly, care companies feel that local authorities aren't paying them the sort of level of fees that they need to train people, recruit people and provide good quality care. And the local authorities are saying, we haven't got the money to do this properly. It's worth remembering that it's only a couple of weeks ago we had the regulator, the head of the Care Quality Commission, warning that social care is at a tipping point, that it is under such pressure. And I think in a sense this is the care companies putting their oar in and saying, look, this is what is happening as far as we're concerned. The worry about that is it has a knock-on effect across the system, with people being delayed in hospitals because although they're ready to go home to be discharged, there is no social care to support them in their homes. And there is a growing worry that if we have a very cold winter, then we're going to see the NHS and the care system at breaking point. Now, the government says it has put more money in and councils have been allowed to raise more money to go into the care system. But there is this ongoing question as to whether or not it is enough money going in soon enough to prevent the real pressures that we're hearing about so much at the moment.
Alison, thank you. Alison Holt. In his first broadcast interview since his failed bid for the Tory leadership, Michael Gove has told the BBC that he made mistakes in the days following the EU referendum. But he denies that he betrayed his fellow Leave campaigner Boris Johnson. Michael Gove has been talking to The World at One on Radio 4.
I wouldn't say I stabbed him in the back, but I certainly came to the judgment in the immediate aftermath of the referendum campaign that while I initially thought that Boris was the right person to be Prime Minister, I didn't think that, for a variety of reasons, which I won't go into, that he wasn't the right person to be Prime Minister at that point.
But you backed him,
yes.
And then withdrew your backing in a very dramatic way
Yes.
in the middle of the night. I mean, isn't that treachery?
No, it's not treachery. I explained my reasons at the time. Revisiting them now, I think, would be, the water is under the bridge. But I think if I take a couple of steps back, I think that knowing what I did at the time, I took a decision to back Brexit, believing it was best for the country. I took the decision I did in the leadership, thinking that for a variety of reasons, that there needed to be a Leave leader, and that Leave leader needed to put forward certain ideas. Now, with the benefit of hindsight and an opportunity to spend some time on the backbenches reflecting on some of the mistakes I've made and some of the judgments that I've made, I actually think that Theresa is the right leader at the right time.
Michael Gove talking on Radio 4. NHS England is to spend £130 million replacing ageing radiotherapy equipment in an effort to transform cancer treatment. An independent report last year called on the NHS to upgrade the machines because many are reaching the end of their useful life. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, reports.
The latest high-tech equipment allowing precision targeting of radiation doses at cancer cells is available at some hospitals, including this one, the Royal Marsden in London. The plan is to make this cancer therapy more widely accessible, with NHS managers admitting that not all patients get the best possible treatment.
I'm absolutely determined that we will provide our patients with the best care available anywhere in the world. The NHS does some fantastic service delivery, some wonderful cancer research, but we know there is variation in what we give our patients nationally, and we need to eradicate that.
Cancer patients here are treated more quickly than with the older radiotherapy equipment.
Machinery, what I'm having at the moment, the work, it's a little bit mind-blowing now and again, but I'm still here, that's the main thing.
It's very relaxing, come in and the
have a lovely picture on the ceiling, which is really quite relaxing. It's just a few minutes and then, you know, you're done, you're on your way, and wait for the next day.
NHS England will invest £130 million over 2 years. It'll be spent on replacing or upgrading about 50% of older radiotherapy machines. The aim is to cover all of them by 2020. High-tech radiotherapy equipment like this is extremely important for patients and improving the quality of their care. The latest announcement has been widely welcomed. But it's not the whole of the cancer story. On some performance measures, including comparisons with other healthcare systems, the NHS has been criticised. For some cancers, the UK survival rates are among the worst in Western Europe. Delays in diagnosis have been identified as a problem in the NHS, as have waits for treatment. The Royal College of Radiologists said the funding didn't go far enough to deliver a 21st century radiotherapy service, and that NHS England was investing a lot less, given the size of the population, than the amount pledged by the Scottish Government earlier this year. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
A 10-year plan to overhaul the NHS in Northern Ireland has been announced by the Stormont executive. Ministers say the health and social care system is at breaking point and in need of radical change. The blueprint is in response to an independent analysis of the system by a panel of experts. Now, it is one of the most prestigious awards in the literary world. Tonight, the Man Booker Prize will be presented in London by the Duchess of Cornwall. The shortlist includes a 19th century murder mystery, an account of a woman's escape from China after the Tiananmen Square protests, and a satire described as worthy of Jonathan Swift. Our arts correspondent Rebecca Jones reports.
It's a prize that makes careers. Salman Rushdie, Hilary Mantel and Kazuo Ishiguro are just some of the writers who've made their names after winning the Man Booker. Ben Okri won in 1991 for his novel The Famished Road, and he says it changed his life.
I could write with more tranquility. I was creeping towards being broke, actually, when I won the prize. I was just husbanding whatever funds I had, and suddenly I didn't have to.
Authors who win the prize enjoy what's sometimes known as the Booker bounce, a rise in reputation, but also in sales. Take last year's winner, Marlon James. His book, A Brief History of 7 Killings, has now sold nearly 500,000 copies.
I think it does hugely influence what people read, and the Booker shortlist, I think, is a way in for many, many people into literature that's going to challenge them and give them, I think, an awful lot more back. So I think it does push people on to experiment and to try different books.
And the writers on the shortlist this year will hope it's their book which will capture the imagination of not only readers, but also the prize judges. Rebecca Jones, BBC News.
Well, you can find out who has won the Man Booker Prize tonight on the BBC News channel. That's at 9:30. Now, let's hear a little more reaction to our top story. This lunchtime, the government's decision to give the go-ahead to the construction of a third runway at Heathrow Airport in preference to the expansion of Gatwick. There is strong opposition from people who live near Heathrow. Campaigners fear that the village of Harmondsworth will be demolished. Frankie McCamley has been gauging opinion there.
Just 2 miles from Heathrow, Harmondsworth is usually a quiet village. But today, there's only one thing people are talking about.
We were optimistic. Obviously, there are many that are very tired. They're very tired of the campaign. It's been going on for some of these 20, 30 years. We're very optimistic that the local council's legal challenge will be successful. It's worked in the past, so we're hopeful for that.
The decision to build a third runway at Heathrow means half this village could be flattened. As the decision was announced, emotions were high. Some say no matter what, they will not leave.
And when it comes to your home?
Well, I said they'd find me in it.
Others, though, do see the benefits of a bigger airport.
And since I've been living in this area and working at Heathrow, I've witnessed the construction of Terminal 4, then I've seen Terminal 5 go up, and the debate for a third runway has been going on for about 20 years. You know, it's always going to be just around the corner, and I mean, I sympathise with the people who want to stay in this village and keep the community together because I love it here. But the airport is always going to have to expand.
Opinion on this street is somewhat divided. This is one of many that are going to be affected. Some residents are happy for their houses to be bought up and for them to move on. Others are completely against the move. The one thing that everyone agrees on is that if this third runway at Heathrow goes ahead, most of these houses behind me are going to be demolished.
783 homes are set to be demolished, but some historical buildings here have been saved. A Grade 1 listed barn and an 11th century church. It's not just here though. A mile away, the whole village of Longford could be demolished. But as the decision is not yet set in stone, some residents here say they still have hope and will keep fighting for as long as it takes. Frankie McCamley, BBC News.
Now let's turn to the weather prospects. Jay Wynn has joined me. Hello.
Hi there, Jane. Good afternoon. I mean, it's something of a north-south split across the United Kingdom this afternoon. This is one of our Weather Watcher pictures from Shetland from earlier on. A lovely view here, lots of sunshine, and it's dry and bright across much of the northern half of the UK. Further south, though, this is the view not so long ago in Somerset. Pretty grey skies, and it's pretty grey across much of Wales, central and southern England. There's been some rain from that cloud, but there's not much of that left for the afternoon. It's beginning to brighten up down towards the far south and west. So through the afternoon, we've got that clouds across the southern half of the UK. Still a few spits and spots of rain with that, but it is beginning to brighten up in the southwest, and that process continues. But the best of the sunshine is certainly further north. A lovely afternoon in Scotland after a really cold start. It was down to -5 in Tulloch Bridge this morning, but through the afternoon, with some spells of sunshine, we creep up to 9 or 10 degrees. 12 or 13 in Northern Ireland. Nice afternoon here. A few stubborn patches of mist and fog lingering into the afternoon. It's trying to clear, but apart from that, we've got some good spells of sunshine. But there's that thicker cloud further south, the odd spot of rain. Most places dry, and 13 or 14 degrees, maybe a 15 with a bit of sunshine in the south and west. And then through this evening, we'd like to see some fog developing across some parts of England and Wales with the lighter winds, but with more of a breeze further north. That's driving in some cloud and some outbreaks of rain. It's also going to keep those temperatures well up on what we saw last night. So it's 8 or 9 degrees in Scotland and 9s and 10s further south. Some of the fog through the morning could be quite dense, but there is a change on the way through the middle part of the week. We've seen winds coming in from the east for quite some time, but through the middle, latter part of the week, we're looking out into the Atlantic. That's where our weather's going to come from. And just lurking out west of us, we've got some much milder air, and that's going to be wafting its way across our shores over the next couple of days. So we could all expect those temperatures to creep up by a good few degrees. But it is a slow start today for some on Wednesday with that fog slow to clear for some places. But the southern half of the UK, by the afternoon, it's bright and breezy. More of a wind further north, and that'll be driving in some rain through the morning. That turns to showers in the afternoon. And temperature-wise, well, we're doing quite well, actually. The milder air's filtering in, and we've got 13 or 14 degrees in the north. Could get as high as 16, 17 in the southeastern corner. By Wednesday night, actually, we've still got a few showers in the north of the UK. Stays fine and dry in the south. And then by Thursday, again, a lot of fine and dry weather. Fog could be a problem again on Thursday morning in the south, where the winds are lighter. More of a breeze again further north and west, and we'll see some rain pushing into the western side of Scotland. But there is a lot of dry weather again on Friday. Jane.
Thanks very much, Jay. Thank you. And just a reminder of our main story this lunchtime. The government has given the go-ahead for a third runway at Heathrow Airport, but the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, who opposes the plan, has just said he doesn't believe it will go ahead. That is all from the BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we join the BBC's news teams wherever you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.